Have you ever noticed that the kinder you are, the less seriously people take you? Deep down, the world doesn't respect good intentions. It respects boundaries. Machiavelli understood this before anyone else. Either you assert your presence, or you'll be manipulated. Have you ever tried to be fair, kind, transparent, and yet you were ignored, underestimated, or even betrayed? Perhaps you conceded to avoid conflicts, kept quiet to maintain harmony, helped without expecting anything in return. But in the end, you realized something cruel. The more accessible you appeared, the more others felt free to push your limits. And the worst part, that wasn't an accident or like a twist of fate. Machiavelli would have said that you taught the world not to fear you. And where there's no fear, there's no respect. The harsh truth is, good intentions aren't enough in a world ruled by interests. Those who don't learn to appear strong become prisoners of their own kindness. So does that mean we shouldn't be good? For Machiavelli, the mistake was never in being good, but in the naivete of thinking that being good alone protects someone. The world doesn't reward pure intentions. It rewards strong postures. This video is not for those who seek to be liked. It's for those who are ready to be respected. Are you willing to be less pleasant and more unyielding? Because from now on, we will talk about how to be someone no one dares to manipulate. Niccolo Machiavelli was a Renaissance philosopher, famous for his book, The Prince. In his works, Machiavelli saw the world unfiltered, without illusions, and had the courage to say what no one wanted to hear at the time, that what drives human relations is not duty or principles, but power. Most people believe the world is governed by justice, but those who observe closely clearly see the world obeys the language of fear and power. This means you can be fair, smart, even brilliant. But if people don't feel your strength, they won't respect you. In this sense, it becomes necessary to understand how the game works. The rules of this game are not declared, yet they operate at every moment. Rules such as, those who talk too much become predictable. That is, the more you explain yourself, the easier it is to map your limits, your fears, and your contradictions. A mind that is overly exposed does not inspire confidence, rather, insecurity. Sometimes, silence is worth more than honesty. A second rule is, those who seek acceptance surrender control, because when your value depends on the approval of others, if someone removes what you desire most, attention, praise, inclusion, you bend. These rules are not cruel. They are natural. Machiavelli merely named them. And those who don't learn to use them end up falling victim to them. But then, how can you make use of them to have an unshakable mind? Before explaining further, let's observe around us who holds power. Those people who are, precisely, quieter, who remain calm while everyone else is agitated. People who don't lose their composure in the face of criticism, who observe more than they speak. Have you ever heard the saying, a barking dog never bites? This means that real power is that which doesn't need to be announced. It is felt. It is in the posture, in the pause before responding, in the way you don't rush to please. It is in the silence you choose when everyone expects a reaction. It is in the confidence with which you establish distance, without having to justify yourself. People like these change the atmosphere of a room without raising their voice, because their actions are calculated, because their mind is not reactive, it is strategic. And that, for Machiavelli, is the greatest virtue, not being a slave to the emotions of others. While some learn to control their own impact, others still live waiting for the world to recognize their good intentions. That's when the most common and most dangerous mistake comes in. The error of the innocent is to expect that the world will treat them justly. Thus, the astute realize that the world reacts to presence. With that, Machiavelli does not invite you to be cruel. He invites you to open your eyes, to see what truly moves others, and to stop being manipulated in order to finally understand the game and win it. From now on, I will explain the path to an unshakable mind. According to Machiavelli, are you willing to completely change your perspective on good and evil? If so, stay with me. For Machiavelli, the success of our actions depends on two factors: Fortuna and Virtus. Fortuna represents everything that is beyond our control, the chance, luck, unforeseen circumstances. Virtus, on the other hand, is what is within our reach, what we can control. Inspired by the ancient Greek arete, predating Socrates, virtue is a rare and powerful quality. It should not be confused with virtue in the moral sense most people know, nor with reason or logical discourse. On the contrary, virtue is strength, courage, cunning, willpower, and presence of mind. It is the ability to act firmly in the face of the unexpected, to adapt to chaos without losing control of the situation. Since we cannot control luck, what remains for us is to resist it with intelligence and preparation. Therefore, the true prince, according to Machiavelli, is the one who develops his virtue to the point of shaping destiny, or at least of not being dragged by it. Have you ever met someone who has virtue? History has seen many. Julius Caesar was an example of this virtue. In a famous historical moment, at the Rubicon River, Caesar faced a dilemma. Crossing it meant starting a civil war against Rome. Staying was a sign of weakness, the final renunciation of glory. He knew that fortune was not under his control, but he fully trusted his virtue. So, he crossed the river with courage and cunning, taking the total risk and forever changing the course of Roman history. Centuries later, Napoleon Bonaparte also demonstrated Machiavellian virtue in its purest form. When he took power after the chaos of the French Revolution, Napoleon realized he couldn't wait for ideal conditions. He moved with speed and precision, turned adversities into advantages, and converted enemies into allies with strategic skill. Napoleon did not react to the world. He molded it to his will, with unwavering clarity and determination. His virtue redefined all of Europe. But perhaps you're thinking, how can I, in my daily life, have the same virtue as these great historical figures? Virtue in everyday life is exactly that, not waiting for perfect conditions. It's quickly perceiving the reality in front of you and adapting to it with intelligence and courage. It is acting calmly when everyone around you is desperate. It is seeing opportunities where others see disasters. It is taking action while everyone else complains. Virtue is that presence of mind that prevents you from reacting impulsively to provocations, yet also doesn't paralyze you when facing tough decisions. But how can one develop virtue? It's simple. When faced with problems, instead of waiting for things to improve on their own, ask yourself, what can I do to overcome this situation? What specific actions can I take? This can apply to many areas of everyday life. If you haven't found a partner yet or are facing difficulties in a relationship, don't wait for ideal conditions. Don't leave it to fate when it requires initiative. Act with virtue. Actively seek partners. And if you're facing conflicts with one, propose changes. Seek help. A couples therapist, for example. Create conditions that don't yet exist. Outline a plan, put it into action, and be willing to adjust it along the way. The same applies to your professional life. Don't wait for opportunities. Build them. Take initiative. Learn. Take risks. Become the protagonist of your own destiny. But doing all this isn't easy, is it? Virtue does not mean the absence of difficulty or the absence of fear. It means acting despite them. It doesn't mean ignoring emotions, but not letting them dictate your behavior. Virtue is acting with cool intelligence when everything seems uncertain, knowing exactly when to retreat or advance. That is true Machiavellian virtue. It is the mind that does not bow before the chaos of Fortuna, because it has prepared to confront it. And now I ask you again, are you willing to develop that virtue within you? For Machiavelli, having virtue is not enough. The real world requires more than essence. It demands appearance. And that is precisely where many fail. They believe they can master the situation without caring about what others think, when in fact maintaining a good image is an important part of virtue, as it opens doors. Machiavelli accurately observed that, in the game of power, appearance is as valuable as reality. He said, men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands, for everyone can see, but few can feel. This means that most people rely on appearances and rarely bother to verify the truth behind them. But what lessons can we draw from this? The lesson that you must take care of your image, however uncomfortable it may be. Attitudes such as listening patiently, even when you've already made your decision, will help you, because the perception that you listen attentively strengthens your image and prevents resistance. Another attitude is showing calm and tranquility even when you are anxious inside, because the apparent emotional control is a powerful advantage. According to Machiavelli, these types of attitudes are essential. For him, anyone who wants to dominate the situation cannot afford to always act with absolute sincerity. They must act with calculation. Now that you've learned to control the image you project, The next step is to understand how to maintain constant respect without becoming the target of hatred. Because appearing virtuous is just the beginning, but being respected and feared when necessary is what sustains authority. This brings us directly to another key issue for Machiavelli, who said, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." In practice, we observe that men offend those they love more than those they fear. The likely explanation for this is that humans have a loss aversion bias. In fact, modern scientists have observed that we respond much more to the fear of loss than to the prospect of gain. For example, if you had to bet between winning $5,000 or losing $5,000, the idea of losing $5,000 frightens us far more than the fact of winning $5,000 would make us happy. Therefore, most of us would avoid taking that bet. But what does this have to do with being nice? It means that the people around you will respond more when you set boundaries and demonstrate the possible repercussions, rather than when you offer your friendship in exchange for good behavior. Or as Machiavelli says, men have less scruples in offending those who are made to be loved than those who are made to be feared. For love is maintained by bonds of gratitude that are broken when they cease to be necessary, since men are selfish. But fear is maintained by the dread of punishment, which never fails. But being feared does not require yelling, humiliating, or intimidating. It requires consistency and the enforcement of limits. People respect those who don't back down in the face of confrontation, who keep their word, who punish justly, and above all, who are not afraid to say no. In practice, this means not being overly accessible, not explaining everything all the time, not hesitating to distance yourself from those who cross your boundaries. You command respect when you make it clear, through actions rather than words, that no one can manipulate you twice. When your silence weighs more than others' speech, when you can, with a single look or decision, change the tone of an entire conversation. And what are the consequences of all this? Do these attitudes not cause discomfort? Building a mind that does not bend comes at a cost, and you need to know it before deciding to follow this path. You will disappoint those who only valued you when you were nice. You will be called insensitive for saying no. You will be labeled arrogant for not justifying yourself. You will be seen as cold for maintaining control. But all that is just noise. Because behind these reactions, there is something that people feel, and that they cannot control. Respect. You begin to realize that your presence makes an impact even when you are silent, that your absence weighs more than the presence of many, and gradually you no longer need to impose yourself, because your mere firmness defines the limits. The world remains the same, but the way it reacts to you changes completely. If you've come this far, it's because something in you has already begun to change. Most people turn off the video in the first few minutes, but you stayed, because deep down, something told you, this is exactly what I needed to hear. Now I want to propose a simple yet powerful action. Write in the comments about a situation in your life where you realized you were molding yourself too much to please others. Say what you would do differently today, with a more strategic mind. This reflection isn't just a vent. It is a silent affirmation that you have decided to stop being predictable and have begun to build a presence that commands. And if this video spoke to you, the next one is already waiting, because this journey doesn't end with understanding. It begins with a decision. Are you ready to be respected? Then prove it with silence, action, and presence.